So Eric and Katrina, we want to welcome you to our first Nichia webinar. And I want to take a minute to just introduce myself, and then I'd like Allison and Rachel to introduce themselves as well. I'm Kelly Falcone. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator at Palomar College, and I am the current director of Nichia. Nichia rotates every 2 years, so this is the second year that it's been at Palomar. And next it's going to rotate back to MiraCosta, who will take the lead for 2 years. And then it goes back around to Cal State San Marcos and then comes back to Palomar. So Rachel, if you're able to unmute yourself, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi, Rachel Hastings here. I am the MiraCosta representative. So when it rotates, I'll become the new director. And I'm just happy to be kind of shadowing Kelly this year to make sure I have it all down.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And Allie?
Hi, everyone. This is Allie Carr. I'm the director of the Faculty Center here at CSUSM and one of our library faculty.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. And then Eric and Katrina, if you would like me to unmute you, I'm happy to. And, feel free to ask questions. Just raise your hand, I'll unmute you. Or you can type questions directly into the chat, because I would love to have this be a little bit more interactive. I do want to start off by just apologizing to both of you. This was supposed to be led by two of my accessibility experts at Palomar, who one of them ended up having surgery and didn't recover as quickly as she thought, and the other one came down really sick today and doesn't have a voice. So instead, you're going to get to hear about creating a usable syllabus from me, who has attended a lot of their training. So I am going to try to share this workshop from the perspective of a faculty member who is on the journey to creating accessible and usable documents for all of my students. And I can share with you some of the tips that I've used in order to make my syllabi more accessible and usable for all of my students. But before we get into the topic for this, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on what Nichia is, in case you two are new to it. So Nichia is the North County Higher Education Alliance. There's two primary goals, and that's to foster collaboration among our colleges and our educators, and improve communication among our staff and students at all three of our colleges. Really, the main goal is to try to increase student transfer success. Nichia was started in 1991 when Cal State University was started. In the very original charter, they said the members of the Alliance believe that collaboration will improve the service they are able to offer their students and the North San Diego County community by permitting the member institutions acting together to accomplish what individual members could not accomplish alone. And that's really our goal with Nichia. If you have a chance to go to our Nichia website, you can learn more about Nichia, the history of it, bylaws, and the original charter. We offer a collaboration grant. Our next grants are actually due April 1st. And really the goal of that is to get the three colleges together, thinking about how you can work together to impact the success of our students in North County, San Diego. So we would love for either of you guys to think about what are some maybe events or activities that you think would be helpful for us to offer up here in North County, San Diego in a collaboration with the three colleges. Rachel or Allison, would you want to add anything to that before we get going into an accessible syllabus?
No, I think that you said the deadlines are coming up and the next one is April 1st. And so it's kind of exciting that it's right now is a good opportunity to kind of think about what we might want to submit.
Absolutely.
Yep, I think you covered everything.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm not sure where you guys are with an accessible syllabus, but I can tell you from my perspective, it's really been a journey and it's a continual learning experience. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the 4 main things that I've been trying to do to make my syllabus more accessible. And again, feel free to chime in the chat or raise your hand and we'll unmute you. But I'd love to hear what you guys have to say as well. So I'm going to cover these 4 areas: using headers, using alt text, using appropriate colors and color contrast, and then using simple tables with headers. So I went ahead and took one of my syllabi and just kind of messed around with it. So the first thing I want to highlight is just the use of headers. So from a visually speaking, if I look at this Health 100 syllabus that you see on your screen, it looks like my headers are in order, right? You have your header 1 looks pretty big, header 2, header 3, it's changing in size. So visually, I can see the difference. What I have seen over time is that we don't use headers correctly. We use them for what they look like visually, but not necessarily the actual flow in a usability way. So one of my tricks to see whether they're actually utilizing headings appropriately is to insert a table of contents. In Google Docs, which is what I'm going to work in today, very easy to do. You can also do this in Word as well. So if you create your syllabus in Word, you can do this in Word also. So if I come up here and I go to Insert and I go to Insert Table of Contents, I'm able to now see what my heading style looks like. And although visually it looked like my headings were in order, they're not. They're all over the place. Because headers aren't just about what they look like to us who can visually see the screen. Headers are important for how you navigate the document. So even though my course title description looked like it was probably a header 1, it's not. It's a header 3. Course title was a header 2. When your headers aren't in order, it makes our students who are using screen readers worried that they missed information. So including a table of contents is really helpful to see whether you're using the appropriate header styles. So I took the first part of my syllabus and I just messed it up for you guys so you could see the difference. If I were to scroll down, the rest of these headers are in order. These ones I kept traditional, how they were supposed to be. And you can see that there's a flow. So if I was testing someone's document, rather than highlighting over all of the headers, I always insert the table of contents first. And that allows me pretty quickly to see whether the headers are in actual logical numerical order. So that's one of my first quick tips. And you want to make sure you're always utilizing the headers. So it's not just good for your students who can see the screen, but for those who are using a screen reader, it really helps them to understand organization. If you don't use headers at all and you instead center a text and bold it really big and change the colors of it, that's helpful for your sighted students, but it's not helpful for your students who are visually impaired who are using screen readers. So you really want to make sure that you're using headers in your syllabus. And that's a pretty quick and easy thing that you can change. So I said before, this course information, I could see, well, what kind of header is it? It's a normal text. So if I want to change this one, I can highlight over it, come up here and go, here's my heading 1. And then I can make sure this one is heading 2. Right now it's saying heading 3. I would come back in here and I would say, actually, this needs to be a header 2. So we want to make sure that we're using the actual formatting of the document. The next thing I want to highlight is your use of alt text. So for example, here's something that is really challenging for our students. If we say something like, take a look at the picture below with my favorite quote. This quote is in a picture, and if I don't put alt text on it, my students with screen readers who are visually impaired cannot see the image themselves. They have no idea what I'm talking about. So we have to make sure that we're utilizing alt text. To utilize alt text in Google Docs, if you just open up your, or click Control or right click on it and go to alt text, here's where then you can describe it. So you want to make sure that you are describing the image so that they can get the most out of it, just like your sighted students can get the most out of it. And Katrina said, using the table of contents to track proper headers and information flow is a great idea. Yes, it is. And it's super helpful, Katrina. It's a really good check. So on your alt text, here's where I would explain this image. So I would explain, that this could be a picture of me because I also have a picture of me on here. So I could say it's a picture of Professor Falcone. She has dark brown hair. Her favorite quote is, and then put the quote that's in the picture. And if I don't do this, then my students who are using a screen reader are lost. They feel like, man, everyone else got to learn what my favorite quote is, but they didn't get to. Sometimes we use decorative images, and if we use decorative images that aren't really in need of a description, if you just do opened and closed quotations, that tells them it's a decorative image, not to worry about it. But if we don't tell them it's decorative, they're always wondering what it is. The next thing that I want to highlight is your use of color. So you can see right here, I took one of my headers, I highlighted it in blue. So I have black ink on a blue highlight, which makes it really challenging to see. We want to make sure that we have good contrast between the background and the text that we use. That, we should, if you're ever curious, there's tools that you can use online that will actually tell you what the contrast ratio is and help you to identify what colors you should be using. Also, in terms of colors, there's websites such as this one. It's the Colorblind web page filter, which is really interesting to use. And what it will do is it will show you what your website looks like to a student who is colorblind. I love the example that they put in here, where they're saying, look at this test, this visual test that will help you to identify whether you can see these colors. And then somebody with different types of color blindness can't see them anymore. This is important for us to recognize too, especially if we're trying to use color in order to draw attention to words in our syllabus. So let's say at the beginning of the syllabus, you said, everything that's where the text is red, that's super important and you should really focus on it. Well, what happens when it's a student who can't see red? And so they don't know what the important text is in your syllabus. So we want to be really mindful. And if you're ever wondering whether the color contrast, or if you're wondering whether color blindness would be a challenge, know that there's tools out here you can use so that you can actually look and see how a student with color blindness would perceive it. I'm going to come back over to my syllabus that I was messing around with for you guys today. And there's one more thing that I want to show you on here, and it's the use of tables. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom. So if you use Google Docs like I do, Google Docs table editor is not as accessible as a table editor in Microsoft Word. Katrina, I'm just seeing your content. Are there alternatives to using color besides italics or bold? Yes, and I just want to clarify, Katrina, are you meaning to call out important parts of your syllabus? Yes, okay, so absolutely, and what you would recommend is actually using words. So this is important, would be something that you could actually put in front of things that you think are really important for your students, which you may feel is repetitive, but it's really helpful for your student who's using a screen reader. When you're creating tables, so something that I used to do all the time is I use tables to manipulate the layout of my document. And I loved doing that because I like being able to separate things out and put them in columns and merge cells. And I really made it almost like I was doing a layout for a web page. That's really challenging for our students. So if you are using tables, you want to try not to use tables for layout and instead use tables for data visualization when you need to actually give information out that has a consistent series. The other thing that's really challenging in tables is if we merge cells. So let me find this other website up here that gave a really good example of a data versus a layout table. So the table you're seeing right here is on a website that's explaining table accessibility. And they're saying for a sighted person, when we see this table, it makes total sense to us, right? We can see that it's 10 points for this paper, it equals the A. But what we're not looking at this for is how would a screen reader read this? A better example of a table to use, if I scroll down on this website, is right here. So they've done a couple things in this table. They've included a table caption that explains what the table is. It's really valuable to explain to your student what information is going to be in that table for your students. You want to make sure that you're using a table header that explains to them what each column is going to entail. And there's no more merged cells. So I can see that the possible grade of an A, here's the length that it needs, the topic, the argument, mechanics, and citations. This was something challenging for me because I tend to like to merge cells a lot because, again, I come from a perspective of layout versus use. So I really had to change the way that I was perceiving and using tables to make sure that they had consistency in the way that it was structured. So those are my 4 kind of quick tips. I want to stress that creating accessible and usable documents really is a journey. And I think it's something that you're not going to get to immediately, but it takes time for us. And if we can focus on just a couple of these things at a time and create these into habits so that we are always doing it when we're creating documents, it becomes that much easier for you to do and for you to be aware. So using headers and everything that you create, putting alt text on all of your images, especially anything that you're putting into like your online courses. We always want to be mindful of color. So whether it's colors to draw out something or it's color contrast between the text that you're using and the background colors you're using. And then when we are using tables, we want to make sure they're really simple tables, that we're not merging a bunch of cells and that we're actually putting headers on them. Another a quick way to identify if tables are accessible is to tab through them. And if you can tab through them and they make logical sense, that's helpful for you to understand how a screen reader would tab through it and read the content to your students. I want to share with you this playlist, and I'll go ahead and put it in the chat for you guys so you have access to it. Hold on, let me take it from here. So this is an awesome playlist from Accessible U, University of Minnesota, that takes you through really short bite-sized videos on different areas that you can focus on to make your syllabi more accessible. From formatting, the basics of formatting it, ensuring you have enough white space, consistent typeface is important, making sure you're using headings, use the table of contents. Even if you don't plan to keep the table of contents in the document, it's fantastic to at least insert the table of contents to identify if you've used your headers correctly. This video takes you through that color contrast and takes you through a couple of the different tools that you can use if you're ever worried that the contrast between your in the background there's not enough contrast. You can actually test those. Hyperlinks is another thing we want to be aware of. So what we want to try not to do is put really long links into a document. Rather, we want to hyperlink meaningful text. So instead of saying, like for this accessible syllabus playlist, I could have said, here, go to this website for an accessible playlist from YouTube and put in the long link just like you see in the chat. When truly I should just say accessible syllabus playlist and hyperlink it with that long website address. What happens when we put really long website addresses into our documents is screen readers will read that entire website address to them, every single letter, versus saying, this is a hyperlink to an accessible syllabus playlist. Using lists is a great way to chunk information. So creating accessible documents, you want to try to limit the amount of text you have that the screen reader is going to have to read. So we want to be really concise, and lists are a great way to do that. This video again takes you through creating accessible tables, really focusing on ensuring you have headers and trying not to get too fancy with them with merging text. And then ensuring that you have alt text on your images. I would love to hear from you guys, and I see that we have Leola and Jesse have joined us as well since we started. But I'd love to hear from you guys what other ideas you have for creating accessible syllabi. I would be more than happy to unmute you guys if you'd like to share. You could just raise your hand or type into the chat. I'd love to hear your ideas, and Rachel and Allie too. So if you have ideas for what you've done to make your syllabi more accessible, or what any tips you've heard from any of your accessibility experts at your college.
Sorry, my kid was screaming a little bit, and so I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this, because I'm somebody who's really interested in digital design and online publications, and oftentimes I don't use Word as my primary kind of like entry point for the syllabus making process. I use like Adobe InDesign, and so I think it's just really important to be conscious of all these different possibilities, just so you know how to use whatever tool that you're using. So I've been able to do some of these things in the platform that I use, but I wouldn't have known to look for those unless I had workshops like this. And so I really appreciate this, Kelly. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Rachel, have you looked up any resources on how to use the accessibility features in InDesign?
Yes, and some of them are easier than others. Actually, what I do is I go to the PDF, their PDF app, the Adobe PDF Reader, and they have accessibility tools in there as well.
Yeah, and tools in order to see whether it's accessible as well.
Yes, and to be able to alter it slightly. I will admit too that oftentimes it's really about options. So I still upload a Word document because I just don't know who's going to be in my class. So they have the option to have the fancy one that I've made all, you know, reflective of my personality. And then they also have the bare basic one too, so that anybody can have access to it.
That's a great strategy to use, especially if you're someone who likes to be really creative in documents. I know for myself, I feel like my syllabus used to be way more fancy and much more designed than it is now. So I feel like I have forfeited some of my creativity in my syllabus to make it, try to make it be more usable and accessible for all of my students in my class, because I don't have that much of the skill set, if you will. Like I don't use InDesign. So, but I would definitely have to sit down and really think about how I would utilize something like that and still have it make sense to our students. Allie, you have anything to add on creating your accessible documents?
The only thing, I think you covered a lot of the things, I mean, all of the things that I would have added. One of the things that I've seen more recently around here that doesn't quite touch on accessibility from like the traditional sense, but can appeal to a lot more students, is adding like an executive summary. I have a colleague who just like calls attention to some really important highlighted things, because I don't know about you all, but our syllabi are like 15, 16, 20 pages long. So having an executive summary with like some of the major dates and the contact information and like a quick blurb on your absence policy, I think can be really helpful and help focus students' attention. That said, that can get kind of muddy depending on how you format it with all of the accessibility things that Kelly mentioned.
I love that idea. And actually, one of the things that I did recently as well is my syllabus is also a video. So it's a video that I took my syllabus, I broke it into the important chunks. I wrote out a script so that it was easy to caption. And then I created a slideshow video with me speaking, walking through it and captioning it, so that the students who would prefer to hear me talking about the syllabus had that option as well. And I think so much of this is about us recognizing that we have such a diverse student population. How can we do things that can help to tap into each of them, their potentials and their abilities and their skills? So that's another option as well, is to actually, you know, speak about it, put that like in your online class, or just make it available for our students who would prefer to actually hear your voice explaining it.
I really like that, Kelly. I did that as well with different parts of my syllabus and just broke them into short videos, 3 minutes in length. And the students watch them probably more than they actually read the syllabus itself. And so I think that's a really good method too.
So Eric just said, speaking of long syllabi, how long is too long? And on top of that, do you find adding a picture of yourself makes your syllabus more accessible and relatable to students? So how long is too long? I think that's really dependent on your course. I actually have, I went from having a pretty long syllabus to a really short one and then back to a long one. And that's because I want to make sure my syllabus is very clear. Your syllabus is the contract you have with your students. And you want to make sure that you're providing the information they need to do well in the course and to just do well in school in general. So providing information about behavioral health and wellness and food pantry and things like that are important for them to see. I think they're important to be in your syllabus. And I think it's important for them to see that you think it's important for them so that you want to share that information. So I tend to err on it's okay if it's longer. However, try to just be as concise as possible in the way that you write it. And do I feel like adding a picture of yourself makes it more accessible and relatable? Absolutely. I think your students, and I'm going to take this from a distance education perspective rather than in person, because in person, they get to see me, they get to hear me every day, they get to know who I am. But in my online classes, everywhere I can, every possible place I can, I try to put something in there that allows them to relate to me better, so that I am not just some robot teaching a course, but I'm actually a human that cares a lot about them and their success. So I like having even a personal statement that's even your teaching philosophy, like, why are you there? What do you want them to get out of this course? So I like to do that. But Allie or Rachel, do you have anything to add to that about syllabus being too long or adding kind of a picture of yourself or personal information in your syllabus?
Definitely think that an image or some type of visual is always useful, especially if you have children or animals. Just in some of the workshops I've been to, it's been recommended the more friendly you seem, the more invitational you seem through your images, the easier it is for the students to actually connect with you. So I definitely recommend that.
I know for us, we have a syllabus policy to follow. So in terms of length, it's really a matter of all of the things that we're required to include, in addition to what Kelly was mentioning about the contract piece. I always like, in addition to the picture, I know some faculty do just kind of a short bio, and it kind of gets to what Rachel was saying about that approachability and finding common ground among students. So I think it's a matter of your level of comfort with how much you want to share, what you want to share, especially when it comes to a picture and things floating around on the internet. So I think if it's something you're interested in doing, I think it can help make those connections with students.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And you're so welcome, Eric. Oh, and Katrina just said, last fall, I have tried to break my syllabus down and upload sections under different tabs. The course schedules under the syllabus tab, class policies go under an important course information tab, and a separate one for grading. So far, students really like it. So Katrina, I'm assuming you're doing that in your online classroom. So you're creating different pages in your LMS. Awesome. I did that recently too, trying to at least take out the college policies. So kind of that other information that I have in my syllabus that has to do with things like behavioral health and wellness, student code of conduct, our food pantry, what we're trying to do with homelessness, things like that. And I've tried to put those in a separate page in our Canvas class as well. Allie, are you guys using Canvas or are you guys still using Moodle?
We're still using Moodle
Okay.
for most things. I want to say we might have 1 or 2 programs that use Canvas, some of our extended learning programs, but I don't know if that's still true.
Yeah. Well, Palomar and MiraCosta are both Canvas schools. And the only reason I just wanted to bring this up is at Palomar, we just created some Canvas course templates that are kind of specific to Palomar with that have pages, kind of what Katrina was saying, with these different pages that focus on different areas of the college that we've actually built into a template for any of our faculty to use. So I'd be happy to share that with MiraCosta as well, since it's a Canvas template. But it was a really great thing for our faculty so that when they start teaching online, they don't start from scratch. They can actually start from a pre-built structure that has a lot of the elements of the syllabus already in there. And the whole thing is built with accessibility in mind. So it uses all appropriate headers. So we really wanted to give our faculty something to start with that was accessible. Do you guys have any other ideas to share? There really is so much that has to do with accessibility, and I think that it can get really overwhelming, which is partly why I love the idea of starting with your syllabus, because if we can get our syllabus to be accessible and usable for students, it helps all of us to learn those skills that we need and create those skills into habits. So I shared with you this playlist. I definitely recommend that you watch it and share it with your other colleagues. And from that, I know this is a super short webinar, but hopefully you guys found something valuable from it. We do plan on doing another accessibility webinar in the future with our actual true accessibility experts. For those that weren't on the call right when we kicked off, I did want to apologize. Our accessibility experts who were supposed to be doing this one were not able to join us. So I thought I would share with you my journey of changing or adapting my own syllabus to try to make it more accessible and useful for my students. So I do hope that you got something valuable out of today. We have a series of webinars this week that we would love to have you attend. If you come over to our Nichia website, under webinars, you'll be able to see the rest of the webinars that we're holding for this week. Tomorrow, we will be with Luke Lara from MiraCosta talking about infusing equity in hiring practices. And then on Wednesday, we get to be with our own Rachel Hastings. Rachel, do you want to say something about your webinar on Wednesday?
Yeah, the webinar that I'm doing on Wednesday is really about the students and very student forward, just how I've used Instagram as a platform to explore oral communication and to train little public speakers like my mini who keeps speaking up. And it's just really awesome. It connects inmates from Folsom Prison with students on the higher ed college level. And I just really look forward to sharing their work and putting them forward. So I really hope that y'all can come back on Wednesday, 12:30.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rachel.
I promise no kids at that one.
I think he just wants to be the next Zoom
He
facilitator. Thursday, we'll be covering eliminating systemic barriers for students of color with one of our counselors at Palomar, Husna Sadat. She's done a ton of research into culturally minded teaching strategies that she'll be sharing. And then we have Kat Soto Gomez on Friday, who's going to be focusing on food justice and sustainability. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope it was valuable, even in this short bit of time. And I just want to say thanks so much.
Thanks, Kelly. We appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
You too. See you guys this week.